Owling. Owling, a form of harassment and or swarming performed against isolated individuals by flocks or parliaments of owls, usually great horned owls, swarming which can end in serious injury or murder. The reasons for the targeting of some individuals by these birds is unknown. In the culture of some of the First Nations peoples, hearing the owl call your name is a harbinger of death. So no, you don't want to hear the owl call your name. And you don't want to call the owl either. Call the owl by imitating its night cry, its hooting. But Ronald did it anyway. It was in the early spring. Ronald had been walking in the park at night with Michelle, walking hand in hand, when a great horned owl announced its presence. Hoo-hoo, 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 hoo-hoo. So Ronald called back, hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo. Instantly, a shadowy form swooped out of the darkness overhead, forcing the young lovers to hit the deck. It had been a great horned owl, and it had been pissed. Ronald covered Michelle with his body in order to protect her from the owl's sharp talons. Fortunately, while the pavement was cold, it wasn't wet. Ronald pulled Michelle to her feet and simply said, "Run." They ran. The owl swooped them again, but it was half-hearted, and they easily got away. Michelle was not impressed. "What did you do that for?" "Come on, Michelle. It was just a joke. I didn't know it was going to do that." And as they walked along together, their conversation drifted into other quarters, and the incident was soon forgotten. But that night, as he was getting into bed, Ronald heard the hooting of an owl from outside his bedroom window. "Hope he didn't follow me home," Ron said to himself as he fell into a deep sleep. As he fell into a deep sleep and dreamed. He dreamed he was walking along a darkened path through a primeval forest, and then he was lost. And as he continued to stumble in the gloom, he heard the hooting of an owl, a great horned owl. Ronald looked up through the all-encompassing darkness, and above him he could see two baleful yellow eyes glaring down at him, an owl, a great horned owl. And as he watched in his dream, the first pair of eyes was joined by another, and another, and another, and then another, until the darkness was filled with a constellation of yellow eyes. And then suddenly the owl swooped down, striking him again and again and again and again with their razor-sharp talons. Ronald woke up screaming, his body drenched by a cold sweat, while outside owls, any number of them, were hooting. Ronald slept no more that night. He had a rough day at work and was hardly able to keep awake. When he got home, he lay down for a moment and promptly fell asleep. He was woken up by the telephone and came wide awake when he heard Michelle's less than happy voice on the other end of the line. "Did you forget something, Ron?" Oh my God, babe. I'll be right over." Ronald splashed some water on his face, and as he was hurrying out the door, he noticed something. Silence! Silence! The owls seemed to have gone. Thank goodness! But as he headed out the side door, he heard a series of loud, penetrating hoots emanating from the fir tree at the side of his driveway. Still, he had places to go and a very special person to see, so he ignored it. But a few hours later, getting out of the car on his return home, Ronald found the owl had been joined by another, and another, and another, and another, who greeted him with a barrage of hoots. He quickly ran inside, but he could still hear them calling, 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 and calling, calling all night long. He lay in bed, listening to them in awe and in growing panic, until he fell into troubled sleep and once again dreamed. This time, Ronald found himself not in a forest, but in a huge parking lot. A huge empty parking lot. All was deathly quiet. In fact, there was no sound at all. And then Ronald heard the hooting of a great horned owl. He looked up and could see one of the magnificent birds perched atop one of the huge light standards and glaring down at him. He could clearly see its huge yellow eyes. And then he saw that all the light standards, all 40 or 50 of them, had an enormous owl sitting on top. And then they all began hooting at once. Ronald covered his ears to block out the cacophony. And then they all struck at once. His scream woke him up. It was morning. The sun was up, and the owls were gone. Gone. But what? What could he do about the night? He knew they would be back then, coming for him, calling to him all night long. He thought about staying at Michelle's. But what if they followed him there? So that night, Ronald chose to stay at work in his cubicle until he finally came to a decision as to what to do. What to do. Suddenly the phone rang. It was Michelle. "What are you doing at work, Ronald? It's nearly midnight." Ronald explained the situation to Michelle, or at least he tried to. Aren't you making too much of this?" she said. "I mean, it's probably just coincidence. Or you have voles or mice in the yard or something that attracts them." No, babe, it isn't voles. I know what I must do, or at least try to do. But it's nearly midnight. Look, I'll call you later, eh? After it's done." "Ronnie!" He hung up. 20 minutes later, Ronald was in the park and standing in the exact same spot beneath the canopy of dark trees, the exact same spot where he had hooted at the great horned owl, standing alone in the dark, when he became aware that everything had gone still, quiet, deathly quiet. He couldn't hear the lapping waters of the nearby lake or the sighing of the wind in the trees, or the sound of the traffic on nearby Albert Street. He couldn't hear a thing, not even any owls. But they were up there, and as he stared into the gloom, he began to see their eyes, yellow circles in the darkness, many eyes, myriad eyes. Ronald cleared his throat and began speaking. He felt foolish, stupid, standing alone in the midnight hour and addressing a flock, a parliament of owls. But it had to be done. It had to. I don't know exactly what to say, Ronald said in a loud, clear voice. I don't know what I've done to offend you, but I've done something, and I want to apologize. I just want this to stop. What do you want from me by way of atonement? I'm willing to do it. Just show me. Nothing happened for several seconds, and then Ronald heard movement, the rustling of feathers, the scratching of talons, and then the night erupted in a cascade of hooting, while the darkness filled with wing and claw and screams, human screams. 20 minutes later, Michelle came running down the path, looking for Ronald, and she found him. Found him on his back, staring into darkness, or at least he would have been staring, if he still possessed eyes. Michelle was able to recognize him, even though Ronald no longer had much of a face. Michelle is now in the psych ward. And the owls? They're still there. Hoo-hoo, 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 hoo-hoo. The moral of the story? If the owl calls your name, don't answer. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the night floaters, werewolves, and the black-eyed children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,021 subs in 2021. Oh, I can see that was an old thing I copied and pasted. It's 2,022 subs in 2022. And I'm so close now. I'm so close. So please, please consider subscribing. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used today courtesy of Pix here. That's PX here. While the music was the dreadful The Dread by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod.